Today, investigators share new video as the hunt for Charlie Kirk's killer pushes into a third day. FBI Director Kash Patel faces scrutiny for saying the killer had been caught. Brazil's Bolsonaro is sentenced to 27 years in a landmark coup plot conviction. Poland says an incursion into their airspace by Russian drones was no mistake. That's after President Trump says it might have been. Belarus frees 52 political prisoners after an appeal from Trump. And, watch the cost of that coffee, US consumer prices look set to keep climbing. It's Friday, September 12th. This is Reuters World News, bringing you everything you need to know from the front lines in 10 minutes, 7 days a week. I'm Carmel Crimmins in Dublin. Charlie Kirk's killer is still at large. Investigators have released photos and a video of a man believed to have carried out the fatal shooting of the conservative activist at Utah Valley University. Footage shows him wearing a black top emblazoned with an eagle flying across an American flag, sunglasses and a baseball cap. Authorities are offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to the shooter's arrest. Reporter Andrew Hay is on the ground in Orem, Utah, where FBI experts are analysing a rifle which has been recovered in a wooded area.
We've seen pictures of a Mauser, a high-powered hunting rifle that you would use to shoot large animals like elk and deer, a single-shot rifle, and it has a telescopic sight.
Kirk was a close ally of President Trump, who plans to award him a Medal of Honor posthumously. Trump was asked about the investigation.
I think progress is being made. He's an animal, total animal, and hopefully they'll have him and they'll get him. What he did is disgraceful. Charlie Kirk.
Investigators have yet to publicly discuss any motive. Andrew says the community in Orem has been left in shock.
The people here are just sort of confused by why it happened here, because Utah is not known as a place where there is a great deal of political polarization.
The young people in general here really resonate with Charlie Kirk. They like his videos. They like that he was a person of faith. People here are routinely, uniformly, almost religious. I was speaking with a couple of 16-year-old high schoolers who were praising Kirk. But at the same time, they want their community to come together.
There's been a lot of confusion around the person responsible for killing Charlie Kirk. Social media posts by FBI Director Kash Patel saying a suspect was in custody on Wednesday were quickly contradicted by local law enforcement and have put Patel under a spotlight, reviving concerns about his lack of experience. John O'Winter covers law enforcement and has been reporting on the manhunt and the surrounding communications.
Usually in the aftermath of an incident, as news is still coming in, the FBI will be hesitant to say anything publicly. And so Kash's posts were criticized heavily by current and former FBI officials who said there's a reason why FBI directors don't tweet. And it is because there are so many details coming in the early onset of an investigation that you have to sift through.
Jonna says that by Thursday, some clarity about the search for the shooter had emerged.
The tension inside and outside the FBI has really turned to the FBI director's lack of experience in law enforcement and what that looks like in the heat of such a moment. Sources inside the White House said that the FBI director's actions over the last 24 hours of the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination were unprofessional and not deserving of the American public, and that has been taken note inside the White House. On Thursday, the White House said it was still supportive of Kash Patel and criticized Reuters reporting as despicable, quote, when there's a crazed killer still on the loose.
Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been convicted by a Supreme Court of plotting a coup to remain in power after losing the 2022 election, and handed a sentence of 27 years. He's now the first ex-president in Brazil to be found guilty of attacking democracy. The verdict isn't unanimous. One judge had voted to acquit him. Luciana Magalhães is covering the case in Brasilia.
Bolsonaro is currently under house arrest, And the sentence doesn't start immediately because once the trial ends, his lawyers are going to have the chance to file motions for clarification. And this might take some time.
I thought he was a good president of Brazil, and it's very surprising.
President Trump has voiced support for Bolsonaro. Earlier this year, imposing tariff hikes and sanctions on the presiding judge. Luciana has spoken with Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo, who now lives in the US.
He does expect some kind of reaction from President Trump. However, we can't say whether it's going to be more tariffs or sanctions on the justices presiding over the trial. So it remains to be seen. But what I can say is it wouldn't be a surprise if we were to see new sanctions after the trial.
Poland says an incursion into their airspace by Russian drones was no mistake. That's after President Trump says it could have been.
Could have been a mistake. But regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation. But hopefully it's...
The United Nations Security Council is set to meet later today after Poland shot down what it says were Russian drones that violated its airspace on Wednesday. Belarus has released 52 political prisoners after an appeal from President Trump. He had previously urged Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, to release detainees Trump has described as hostages. It's the biggest batch of prisoners pardoned by the authoritarian leader so far, and included over a dozen foreign nationals. But it was far short of the 1,300 prisoners whose release Trump had called for. Mark Trevelyan has been following their release.
President Donald Trump last month made a telephone call to Alexander Lukashenko in which he asked him to free a large number of Belarusian political prisoners. And the day that he made his telephone call was the same day that he was heading to meet President Vladimir Putin of Russia in Alaska. And while he was on his way there, a Belarusian opposition activist called Dmitry Bolkonyets sent an email to Trump in which he asked him to intervene with Putin over the situation of Belarusian political prisoners. And this activist Bolkonyets said to Trump in the email, if you can get these political prisoners out of Belarus, we will nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize. Whether that was the deciding factor or not, within hours of this email being sent, Trump was on the phone to Lukashenko.
Lukashenko says he's released people who have done their time for breaking the law and says there are no political prisoners in Belarus. The US says it will ease its sanctions on the Belarusian state airline and consider reopening its embassy in Minsk. And Mark says these are key developments for the Belarusian leader.
So the Americans are offering Lukashenko a way to ease his international isolation and return to the fold.
US consumer prices have just seen their biggest jump in 7 months, driven by higher food and housing costs. The Labour Department says inflation is up 2.9% over the past year. US economics editor Dan Burns says consumers can expect prices to continue to grind upwards.
Food costs, grocery store costs are starting to add up, and that can be from a variety of reasons, some of which are associated with higher costs of things like imported coffee. Coffee's up like almost 21% over the last year. Some of that's from problems, and also some of that's from tariffs. Trump has imposed 50% tariffs on goods from Brazil, and we get almost a third of our coffee from Brazil. Beef prices are up, fresh fruit and vegetable prices were up. So people at the grocery store are really beginning to notice a difference in the cost of feeding their families.
And a recommended listen for your weekend. Christopher Walljasper goes on assignment to look at the healthcare scene in the US. There are hopes RFK Jr. will address chronic illness and the American diet, and fears that he'll undermine vaccine uptake and development. Tune in this weekend for our deep dive into Make America Healthy Again. For more on any of the stories from today, check out Reuters.com or the Reuters app. Don't forget to follow us on your favourite podcast player. If you're listening on a smart speaker, just ask for the latest news from Reuters, 7 days a week. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.